can you describe what your antidepressant withdrawal looked like? What symptoms did you have? And how fast did that start?
So most of my serious, very like acute symptoms came from the Effexor more than the Wellbutrin for me personally. Effexor has a shorter half-life, so it leaves the body faster and creates more intense symptoms. The very first notable symptom, I mean, I kind of felt off. If you've ever missed a dose of these drugs, like I used to feel like, oh, I had just taken like 4 shots of espresso, my heart would race and I would feel kind of shaky. So I anticipated that, if I'd accidentally forgotten to take it or, the pharmacy was closed or something. But then what happened is one day I was living in New York City at the time. I was walking on Park Avenue and it had just started to rain. It was about dusk. And all of a sudden, like in one moment, all of my senses intensified. Like I saw the light bulb like come into focus and all the lights from the taxis coming at me went from round orbs into really sharp stars and everything got super loud. And then my skin started really hurting with the rain. The rain was coming down and it felt like bullets on my skin, like little BB gun bullets. And I was just so overwhelmed by this sensory feeling. And that's the first time I realized that something big is about to happen to me. And these drugs were doing a lot more than just, keeping my depression at bay, which is what I assumed was the only effect that they were having. I realized in that moment that they were having an effect on my entire physical system. And that in some ways was actually kind of cool because I was like, oh my God, it's like I've just woken up. Like, what else is there?
Yeah.
But then the psychological side effects set in for me, and those were just the horrific ones. I mean, for me, the worst part was violent, intrusive thoughts that just went on for months. And it's just, it's a little difficult to explain, but it's kind of like this awareness that you have the ability to hurt yourself or others at any moment. And then you can kind of see in your mind's eye what you might do. And if you'd never experienced that before, I thought I was absolutely crazy. Like, obviously I needed to be on psychiatric medications because this is who I am on the inside. That's what I thought. But I was too terrified to tell my psychiatrist about it because I thought she would put me on an involuntary hold. So I just ended up like, I literally locked myself in my apartment and just, waited it out thinking I was nuts. And that was the hardest one for me to deal with mentally. But then there was, the intense mood swings, intense mood swings, rage, really, really severe rage, like destructive rage. I stopped sleeping. I didn't have akathisia I don't think. Like if I did, it was more in just like a general pacing kind of antsiness that I associated with just so many changes. But, I know a little bit about what you've described in your akathisia situation. Like I didn't feel like that. And I just feel like, my God, I was so lucky not to have gone through that.
I mean, well, after seeing what happened to my dad, so for me, I stopped taking them cold turkey too. And I'd been off and on Wellbutrin for a while, but I ended up having a seizure on Wellbutrin. So I'd stopped taking that when I was 21. They like increased the dose to try and get a hold of the like depression or get the depression symptoms under control. And then I had a seizure. So we got rid of that one, which I think I just felt better getting rid of that one. But the Cipralex, I felt pretty good. Like I got my depression under control with dietary changes. I was like, well, don't need this thing anymore. Stopped taking that. And then I felt pretty good for about a week. And like good, like, oh, wow, I can feel I'm not sedated. Like things are great. And then it was really for me at like a 2-week period where I went, and it almost went from like normal to suddenly horrifying in like
a moment.
Yeah, it was a day. And I think it coincided like for me, I was trying to reintroduce more like carbier food. So I tried to introduce a food and we had kind of an autoimmune response. And then that combined with the antidepressant withdrawal. And I hallucinated. Like I went out, it was the same thing. It was like things are a little too real and they're a little too close and sounds are too loud and like lights hurt. It's like, and I'd always had kind of an aversion to fluorescent lights, which might have been
me too.
part of being on drugs. Everything was too bright and too loud and too dark and like scary. And I was like, my heart was beating faster than it should. And I was like, am I panicking? Am I having a panic attack? Like what's going on here? And I ended up hallucinating, like my brother into kind of this demon face looked at me.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like looked at him, was like, went into my apartment and the same kind of thing,
Yeah.
turned on all the lights, closed the door, and was
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
maybe I live here for the next
Yeah.
while.
Maybe I live
Yeah.
here. Yeah. Yeah. That's, yeah. Was it like, was it like that's the best way to describe it? Was it like a mind's eye hallucination, or was it like if you had like his face was replaced in your visual field?
I mean, it didn't like, I knew I was hallucinating, obviously, but he turned around and it had this horrifying like teeth, I think teeth like demon face on my brother. Like, so he turned into a little demon, looked at me, and I was like, okay, I've stopped taking all, like kind of similar. I've stopped taking all my medication and now I'm fucking crazy.
Right.
But then also part of me was like, no, I felt so good. Like, I know there was a period of time where I could feel good. So I had antidepressant withdrawal for 2.5 years. And it kind of went like up and down and up and down. And I just knew, you know, I think I'm pretty sure I'm not depressed. Like that I just need to wait. And at the time, actually, how long did it take you to figure out that you were in antidepressant withdrawal? Did you know that you were in withdrawal?
Yeah, it didn't take me very long. I think like after maybe the first, you know, severe violent thought episode, a couple things happened. One, I had talked to a psychologist who was a family friend who lived in a different state. So she couldn't commit me. So I was like, okay, I'll talk to her. And she kind of helped me understand that she said crazy people don't know they're crazy. So she basically made me aware of the fact, the fact that since I was aware of it, then that is an important part in the process of making sure you're not actually going to act on any of these thoughts. It was still terrifying, but at least it like calmed me down from thinking that, oh God, I'm going to do something terrible. And then she, you know, kind of indicated that it was about withdrawal, but she didn't know too much about the subject either. It really wasn't until I then just got on the internet and I started searching, and there was almost no literature at the time, but there were a couple of like rogue websites with other people explaining the same things that made me think, okay, I'm having a reaction to getting off these drugs. It's clearly antidepressant withdrawal. I didn't know it was a thing. I thought it was really rare. I thought I was just like in a really, really rare camp of people.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, now I know that that's not the case, that this is much, much, much more common than I ever thought, and that we ever thought at the time. But it did make me feel like, okay, at least this is a anecdotally documented thing, that I'm not the only one. I didn't know how long it would last, though. I thought it would go away a lot faster than it did. That's for sure.
Yeah. How long did it take for you for the acute symptoms?
The acute symptoms were about a year, and at about a year is when I started to say, okay, like I don't know how long, because it's, you know, the window's in waves. You're kind of going up and down. At least that's how it was for me. And so after about a year, I felt confident that if I had a bad stretch, I was going to come out of it. So that's for me when I started to make the mental shift that, okay, this is not a forever thing. I don't know how long it'll last, but I started to, you know, just embrace it, I guess if you can, and find some radical acceptance for the process. And the more I did that, actually, the more things lessened. And, you know, by about 2 years, I was like quite confident that I was through it.
I didn't know that it was, I'm so pissed off about this entire thing.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was antidepressant withdrawal because I was doing these so I've got arthritis, and I was doing these diet tests, and I was reacting quite badly to like certain carbier foods that were giving me arthritis and autoimmune flare-ups. And that coincided with how severe the antidepressant withdrawal was for me. So I was attributing the withdrawal to food reintroductions, just combined with the flare-ups and arthritis.
Yeah.
Right? So for the first 2.5 years, I literally just thought I had extremely severe reactions to food. Yeah. I didn't know it was antidepressant withdrawal. I think because it took 2 weeks to hit, and then when it hit, it was when I reintroduced a food that gave me an autoimmune response, and it was like after that I just couldn't get things under control, and it was crazy. I was like having hallucinations periodically. It was like terrifying. It didn't occur to me that it was antidepressant withdrawal until Dad So he stopped taking the antidepressant.
Wait, can I ask, what's the order? Who went first, you or him?
I went first.
Okay.
So I went first. I stopped taking them December 2015, about 3 months after I started a really low carb diet and got my autoimmune symptoms under control. We were going through this at the same time. Yeah. Yeah. When was yours?
I started in like March of 2016.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that was December 2015. Dad stopped around the same time. It was later, maybe February. Mm-hmm. And I mean, neither of us, even though he's a psychologist, he didn't know about the antidepressant. Like, people don't understand antidepressant withdrawal. They know opiate withdrawal. They're like, okay, people can get addicted to opiates. They get, like, you can't stop taking those suddenly. You have to wean off. It can be unpleasant, like extremely unpleasant. It can, depending on what you're on and how long you've been on it and what dose and all that. But they do not know about antidepressant withdrawal, and it does not feel like a normal withdrawal. It's not like a hangover or a painkiller withdrawal. It's just like being put in a horror movie.